This Lenten season, we've been going through the book of Matthew, looking at Jesus' prediction of his death for each and every one of us. And this evening, we'll do the same thing, except we will look at Matthew chapter 27 as we look at the crucifixion. If you were to have lights, and if you were to look at Matthew 27, in verses 11 through 26, you will find Jesus standing before Pilate. And it's there that we find the verdict given to crucify him. And so then in verses 26 on, they start by having Jesus flogged. In verses 27 through 31, we find all the mocking going on by the people, by the soldiers. They strip Jesus down from his clothes. They put that crown of thorns upon him. And yes, even more mocking takes place afterwards. Starting in verse 32, we see them moving towards Golgotha, where they start the process of the crucifixion. Jesus endured this suffering and abuse for 3 hours, from 9 a.m. until noon. Then at noon, an even worse torture fell upon Jesus. And that's what I want us to focus on for the next few moments. Verse 46 tells us that the Father turned his back on his own Son. That God the Father, the one who forever had been in communion with his Son, Jesus, turned his back. The Father, in essence, had to say, I do not know you, to the Son. For Jesus was taking on sin, and God cannot and will not have anything to do with sin. The King had been betrayed and denied by Judas and all the rest of his friends and by the Roman authorities. Now he was left alone by his own Father. At that point, he began to literally bear hell itself. Separation from God. He began to bear the punishment for a world of sins. This 3-hour period was so dark, so black, that creation itself became dark as well. Now think about this for a moment. From noon to 3, that normally would be the brightest. It would be the hottest time of the day. And yet darkness covered the land. Creation mourned its Creator's death and turned its back on the one the Father now turned away from because of the sin that he had become. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus cries out, completely alone, bearing the guilt of all sinners. At about 3 p.m., near the end of the 3 hours of darkness, Jesus cried out these words, the desperate cry of an abandoned son to his Father. But still he remained the sovereign King, as evidenced by the fact that he remained on the cross for you and for me. Now, if we were to jump down to verse 50 of chapter 27 of Matthew, we see Jesus once again saying something. And in Matthew's account, he does so without giving us the actual words. It says that Jesus cried out again in a loud voice. As this final act of Passover Friday, the Messiah, Jesus, the Christ, gave up his spirit. The King proved sovereign even over the timing of his own death. This loud cry was a shout of triumphal completion. The book of John says it this way in John chapter 19, verse 30. Jesus cried out, "It is finished." It's been completed. And so now, at the moment of Jesus' death, we find in Matthew chapter 27 that God provides 3 miraculous signs. These signs testify to the reality of what was really happening. For you see, to the average person who would have seen the crucifixion, who would have been there looking on, it might seem that all is lost. Jesus is dead. Why? He was such a good man. He healed and touched so many, and yet here he is. He's gone. He breathed his last breath. They proved it. He is dead. But these miraculous signs reminds us of the fact that the greatest plan was still being acted out and acted upon. The first of those signs is in the temple. The Holy of Holies was the innermost sanctuary, the place where the Ark of the Covenant rested and where the presence of God was said to abide. This place was so sacred that only one time a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest was allowed to enter in. And at that point, he offered the blood of a special sacrifice to atone the sins of all of Israel. Now, the room outside of the Holy of Holies was called the Holy Place. And between those 2 rooms hung a thick curtain, separating all of humanity from the very presence of God, except for the high priest that one time a year. At the moment of Jesus' death, that first sign happens. The curtain was torn in 2 from top to bottom, and the tearing opened the way for everyone to enter into the presence of God through the sacrifice of Jesus. For you see, because of his death on the cross, we now can have direct access to the Father. Because of his death on the cross, we now have access to the Holy One. Because of his death on the cross, we now can find forgiveness for our sins. Because of his death on the cross, the Day of Atonement is right now. The Day of Atonement is here, and we have access to him. We're able to be at one with our God. That was the first sign that Matthew speaks of. The second sign was the earthquake and splitting of rocks. And just perhaps it reflected the immensity of the earth-shaking revolution that had just taken place. For you see, through the death of the Son of God, the way had been clear for sinful creatures to enter the company of the holy God. And then the third sign served as a testimony to many people in Jerusalem concerning what had just happened. Jesus had just died on the cross, and all of a sudden the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. These were holy people, those set apart for a special purpose. The death of Jesus gave the opportunity of life everlasting for those of us who are his. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? And all of this happened when Jesus died on the cross. All of this happened in that dark time when he became sin, who knew no sin. Why? So that you, so that me, so that we might become the righteousness of God. How can I better serve thee, Lord? Thou who hast done so much for me. Faltering and weak my labor has been. Oh, that my life may tell for thee. You see, it's here at this cross, at the sacred hour, here at the source of reviving power. You see, at the cross, we find everything that we need. Everything is here. The power is here. It's a place that used to be dark, but now it is lit up. It's a place now that we find hope, that we find joy, that we find peace, that we find love. Whatever it is you need, you can find it right here. You don't have to come with it already. Helpless indeed. That's when we come to the cross with our need. Lord, for thy service, fit me, I plead. Second verse talks about the fact that sometimes our ears may be dull to hear what he would say to us. Sometimes we're slow to respond. Our hands don't move. And it's not a matter of us not moving fast. It's a matter of us not responding to the Spirit. Oh, lead me to Calvary. The third verse says, strength, Father, for my weakness. Please, Lord, impart. I'm weak right now. Sight for my blindness. I can't see. Faith. I need faith because right now I've got some doubts. I've got concerns. I've got things weighing heavy. Lord, I would crave. Why? Because I want to serve you worthily. Here at the cross is where we find everything that we need. But the question this evening for each and every one of us is this: are we willing to come to the cross? Are we willing to literally come to the foot of the cross and to lay onto the cross those doubts, those fears, those wrongs, those pride, whatever it is, and say, here at the cross at the sacred hour, here at the source, I need your power right now. And so as we sing this song together, let me just encourage us to respond. Because I recognize that I have things right now that are weighing heavy on me. I have some doubts right now in my life. I'm just being honest with you. I have some concerns in my life. I need this cross. And so, as a symbol of me laying it, I'm going to lay down this rock, and there's a basket of rocks here that have some weight to them. I don't want to carry it around any longer. And so as we sing, I'm going to lay this on the cross here, and then I'm going to lay it on the altar as well. I'm going to lay myself on the altar and ask God to move. And so as we sing that first verse, as we continue just to sing all three verses in chorus, if you feel led to respond, if you feel led to come forward and to lay whatever it is at the cross, to pray here at the altars, then let me encourage you. Please do so. Because here at this cross is everything that we need.